Welcome back to Tech Talks from Commercial Baking. I'm your host, Joni Spencer. In this episode, sponsored by Campbell Systems, I am speaking with Glenn Campbell, president of Campbell Systems, about dust reclamation and how it plays a role in efficiency, safety, and product quality. Glenn, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Joni.
It is so good to see you. And I'm excited about this because it's a topic that I don't typically get to cover. So I think we are going to dive into some new things today. I want to start with talking about dust and its impact on product quality. I think it's a good starting point for this topic. Can you just kind of walk me through when and where in the bakery can or even will dust affect the product?
Great question. We've literally done dust collection from the scaling, hand scaling area all the way through into packaging. Dust collection is literally a global problem, and we've put systems on 5 continents over the last 17 years. The one common issue, I think, beyond even ROI, is the product quality issue. An example would be the bottom of the hamburger bun. It's difficult to get all the dust off, but it can be done with the right amount of suction and a well-designed hood. So there's an immediate product quality benefit to not seeing a glob of flour dust on the bottom of the bun. But beyond that, there is some residual dust. Sometimes it can be absorbed during proofing and baking, but there can be a negative effect on the crust quality. So we try to get as much off as we can, but we have to do that without the dust escaping containment.
All right. So when we're talking about dust, typically we're talking about flour, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Are there any other types of dust that bakers need to be thinking about or be aware of? And then when particles get airborne, what are some of the safety hazards that happen? So I guess that's a two-pronged question. So first, let's talk about what other types of dust we can be thinking about.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, flour dust gets as small as 5 microns, very challenging, and that's one we're most aware of. But virtually any dry ingredient is going to escape containment during hand scaling or mixer loading, and that's where we need to come in. So the list is extensive. It could be cornmeal, various pectins, cinnamon, you name it, any dry ingredient. Operators will complain about the dust if they're exposed to it directly and inhaling it. So naturally, that's uncomfortable. Some bakeries, we've even provided dust collection systems because there was a mandate to collect it. You'll see the operators forced to wear dosimeters on their clothing so they can track the amount of dust they're aspirating. And so we obviously want to control that dust, contain it, and recycle it. In addition, excess combustible dusts will draw the wrong kind of attention when your bakery updates the mandatory dust hazardous analysis.
For me, when I think about dust and safety hazards, I'm thinking fire hazard. That seems to be the most common, but it's really interesting that you mention the inhalation of dust as well. Which one is probably the more common safety hazard, the inhalation or the fire hazard? And then what can be done to prevent that?
Sure. In the US, no doubt the combustible dust issue gets more attention. In other countries, Canada, for example, there's also a significant interest and attention paid to how much ambient flour dust and other dusts the operators are exposed to. And we'll see that too, like in California, where there are more stringent regulations on ambient dust.
It's interesting. It seems like the inhalation hazard is something that could be easily overlooked because a fire hazard can be catastrophic. And so it's easy to focus on what their workers are inhaling as well. What sort of dust reclaim processes are there that can sort of mitigate these risks?
Looking at the scaling areas I mentioned earlier with the mixer loading, bag dump areas, that's where a lot of these dusts are released, especially other than flour dusts. So we like to look at those areas. And it's an area that's really not been drawn much attention over the years. But I think as the scrutiny goes up, you're going to see more and more interest paid in capturing those dusts. And obviously, at that point, it's not a significant volume and it's not a consistent dust. So it's not reusable. And there's really no RI except for the intangible ones, but they are significant.
at the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned buns. And so shiny, glazed, beautiful buns, they are really having a moment right now. In what ways does dust become a problem with this part of the process in this specific product? Is there a way to control that?
Yeah, boy, this issue is creating some new challenges for the bakers. And the answer is that yes, we can address it. It takes some new techniques. No matter how carefully the glaze sprayer is adjusted, overspray of the glaze material will coat the baking pan around the bun, in between the buns, if you will. And during baking, it dries. And then during depanning, it may be broken loose. And then, of course, the pan cleaner is supposed to remove it. But it's very difficult to remove all those glaze flakes, especially from the corners of the pan and so forth. So then, as the pan is recycled into makeup and passes back under the dust collection hood, the residual flour from that process, along with any of these glaze flakes, is going to be reclaimed. And with the traditional systems, it will be passed back up into the zigzag flour sifter on a bun line. And then as those flakes break down into very, very small particles, they might pass through that sifter onto the surface of this subsequent dough piece and create specks in the final product after baking later on. There's a second problem can happen is if some dough is reworked, the pan is pulled aside because it wasn't panned properly or whatever. And if that dough is thrown back into the next batch or into the divider and reworked, then those glaze flakes can even end up inside the product, if you can imagine that. So lots
Wow.
of issues here. Yeah, exposure, recall concerns, misunderstanding because there's nothing dangerous about it, but not what you want in your bun. Washing the pans between every pass, which is really the only way to guarantee that none of the glaze remains. The other solution we're doing nowadays is dual dust collection so that the dust that's collected from the pan is not intermixed with dust collected earlier in the process, like on the molder. And in that case, we really emphasize the molder and doing a good job of collecting dust off the molder belt and off that product so that the impact on ROI of not recycling all the dust is minimized.
So, in keeping with this theme of buns, is it safe to assume buns are the most common product or process that we associate with dust and flour reclaim? Is that a safe assumption?
It seems like buns is the majority of our business, but as more and more products are made on sheeting lines, we have definitely seen interest and applications there. I think we've reclaimed dust on everything from bagels to biscuits to pita to pizza because we focus on bakery dust collection. We're not a generic dust collector manufacturer. We understand the applications going in and are able to fine tune our solutions quickly for whatever the final baked product happens to be, whether it's a sheeting line or bread line or what have you.
Okay, that makes sense. When we're talking about all of these areas and we're thinking about the bakery expertise that Campbell Systems has, what is the best way for a baker to get in touch with you all and find out what the first steps are? How can they learn more about what's happening in terms of dust in their bakery operations?
We understand bakers don't wake up looking to solve their dust collection problem necessarily. We have a variety of solutions we can offer. The easiest way to see some of these is go to our website, campbellsystemsinc.com. And lastly, I want to note that we're proud to be exhibiting at ASBE in Chicago at the Sheraton Riverfront, February 17th to 19th. We'll be at tabletop number 302.
It's awesome. And the Baking Tech conference is a great place to really sit down with you and have a conversation that dives a little bit deeper into these things that we're talking about because it is more of an intimate environment so that people can ask those specific questions about what am I not thinking about in terms of dust in my bakery, right?
Sure. And to that point, it's very important if you're planning a new line or a new bakery to incorporate dust collection discussion into the process early on. It's not an add-on. It's much less expensive to integrate that as part of the discussion. It's a necessary evil, perhaps, in your mind, or perhaps not. It's just a product quality thing. But let's get involved early And at ASBE, for example, the OEMs are there, and we love integrating with OEMs. The controls can be integrated, for example, to make everything less expensive and more intuitive.
I love it. I love it. Well, Glenn, it is always a pleasure talking to you, but I really specifically enjoyed this conversation because there's a lot to learn from you.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm learning a lot from the bakers every day, so I'll just happy to share it.
Thank you so much for taking time to speak with me, and I will see you at ASB.
Fantastic. Thanks, Joni.